Welcome to Incessantly Seeking, where we discuss the pursuits that drive our lives with a new guest every Friday. I'm your host, Luciana Fauhaber, and today we're discussing the pursuit of equality. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of Incessantly Seeking. Today, we're speaking to Ana Flores, who was the founder and CEO of Grow Latina, a community of Latina influencers with the purpose of raising Latino voices and representing our stories. Thank you so much for being here today to discuss this pursuit for equality. So how does this idea started for Grow Latina?
Oh, Luciana, muchas gracias. Thanks for having me here. Gosh, it's I think as a lot of our businesses, from women who are passionate and that businesses that have this type of mission, they don't start from one day to the next. They evolve. So the story isn't short. It's not easy to tell, but basically, this is our 10th year. The company, I founded it in 2010 as Latina Bloggers Connect, and we were the first network company connecting Latina bloggers with brands. I mean, now that's known as influencer marketing. Now that's, a huge business and a huge industry. But back then it wasn't. It was a handful of bloggers that we had realized that we wanted to continue in this beautiful medium that we had found, that in essence, especially for Latinas and especially for the BIPOC community, it was a place that democratized our voices, right? I came from 15 years and working for major media brands, for Univision, for MTV Latin America and Mexico, for Mundo, now NBC Universal, always creating content for Latinos. But it wasn't until I found the digital space where I really felt that my voice was being heard. And I had a blog called Spanglish Baby for parents raising bilingual and bicultural kids. I was a mommy blogger back then, and I loved it. I loved what we were able to create there. And I wanted to continue doing that. And to do it, I needed to monetize. So to monetize, we had to work with brands. So I kind of, unlocked the code. And I realized that if I unlocked the code, I wanted the rest of my fellow Latina bloggers to also unlock the code because we weren't monetizing yet. So I kind of set myself to be the one to do that. Brought together the community of Latina bloggers, put up a dry Google form in 2010 with like a website that I put up on my own. And I said, if you're a Latina blogger, sign up here. And if you're a Latina blogger that wants to work with brands, sign up here and I will get you work. And that we did. Within like the first month, I had Sprint as my client, and then Neutrogena, McDonald's, Clorox. It just kind of like started exploding. Within a year, there was already competition and the industry started to mature. So that really quickly evolved in the next few years into we were definitely the most important influencer marketing agency for Latinas. It's really not what we do anymore. In 2015, we launched our first summit called We All Grow, because our motto has always been, when one grows, we all grow. And that summit just really became the place where Latinas felt safe, they felt seen, and they felt heard. And this wasn't only Latina bloggers. By then, it was women that were finding us online because it was always an Instagrammable conference. So they would find us and be like, I want to be part of this community because this is the community that I feel speaks to me. Now, 10 years, so many years later, there's so many more, thankfully, but back then there weren't. So we were selling out every year, and we just really decided that our strength and my superpower is listening and connecting. And just really diving deep and listening to where it is that our community is at every single step of the way, right? What it is that they need, what it is that we're seeking at the moment. So whether it is, we would open up the stage for wellness. We created our first wellness day 2 years ago, 3 years ago in 2018. And or a space more for like the activist voices, a space more for the artist voices, the creatives. Like, how can we continuously be serving the Latina community via the spaces that we create, which we hope always feel like a safe and inclusive space?
I love that. And I'm so glad you brought up the summit, because the first time I was ever going to go to the summit was 2020 when the shutdown happened. And I'm still super bummed. And I never got
So
to
are we.
experience that. Yeah. And I remember it was supposed to be in Palm Springs, and I was following all the posts, and we are all super excited. I believe it was at the Riviera. And I was like, I love that place. So, hopefully that will come back. But Oh, great. And I love that you mentioned that, it's not only for entertainment people. I love that the blog community got together. And when we talk about blogs, we're talking about anything from lifestyle and food,
Mhm.
like you said, mommy bloggers. And I love that. Do you think that We All Grow, it's still like a very mixed, different areas of influencers?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, how we survive, our revenue, where that comes from, is really working for brands, right? That's how we're able to really offer all these free opportunities to the community. It is because we don't yet completely monetize the community in that sense. It's all free to access. The summit does have, a ticket price, but we always keep it super low for what it is. So we work with the brands, and we work very strategically. So the work that we do that you see up front isn't everything there is. There's like that's like the tipping point, because behind the scenes we have been working for this equality, to the topic of the conversation on today, and like really helping the brands understand via the access that we have to multicultural dollars that we know is a fragment of the actual marketing dollars that they have, is really helping them understand how to reach us and how to invest those dollars in authentic ways and showing up in the places that matter to us, like how to speak to us, but not only speak to us but include us in that conversation, because we are the biggest consumers, right? We are the ones that are moving the needle that we know, right? And in film and theater and consumer products, especially in beauty and travel, et cetera. Like we definitely are the ones. So how do we help the brands understand how to really speak to us? And then us be able, through those partnerships and those collaborations, create really meaningful spaces like the summit, like different opportunities that we constantly bring to the community. And I forgot your question because I think I started going around and I didn't really like, let me come back to it.
No, I'm glad that you're talking about equality. When we started talking about that in the Latino community, particularly, and has been one of my pet peeves when I moved to America. When I got here, it was the first time that I felt like, oh, now I'm brown. And
Mm.
where do I fit in? And I tell the story jokingly that in my university, there was a club called Latinas Unidas. And
Mhm.
they kicked me out because I was Brazilian. So in their minds, technically,
Oh,
that wasn't Latina. and
okay.
and we had a discussion of geography of how, like, well, wait a minute, Brazil is the largest country of Latin America. How can you say that we're not Latina? And my friend who was with me at the time, Judy, turned out to be an attorney, and so she was already advocating for me back then. And she's like, well, I'm Puerto Rican. If she's not Latina, then I'm not Latina. Technically, I'm American. And they go, okay, you're both out of the club. And that was the
Ah,
end. And that was the end of my membership of the Latinas Unidas Club. But it was my first experience of, oh, I am
that's
not.
terrible.
Yeah, it was interesting to feel like I'm not in the mainstream, but I'm also, perceived as not belonging to this community. So I love,
Mm-mm.
and I think it's important in the Latino community, and I've had this conversation with the Asian American community and the African American community, is that they do identify by this hyphenate of Latino Americans or Latinx
Mhm.
or whatever that is. Do you think for our community, are we still like further out into this equality unison of fighting for each other, or do you think that, you made your life kind of
Mhm.
spearheading that movement, and
Yeah.
so you're the best person to speak of how far have we come as a community?
Listen, I think it's I even though I have, dedicated my in my life, I feel, in the last at least 2 decades to really bringing forward an understanding of who Latinas are and how to bring us together in ways that matter to us. At the same time, I will never say that we are equal, because we're not. Right? That's the thing. That's actually part of the beauty of embracing how different we are. But when it comes to Latinidad, or in your case, in the story that you shared with us, it is about how you choose to identify. And that's what should be respected. If you choose to identify as Latino, we're not going to be putting there, trying to measure how much of the Latinidad you actually have and you don't. And in that case, if anything, they would have had a point if they said Hispanic Unidas, right? Because then Hispanic
Right.
means something different. So let's get the terms right in that sense. But how crazy is it about the terms, about which country we're from, which language we speak, etc. Because at the end of the day, that's the beauty of where we come from and the shared background that we have that is really difficult to understand unless you are part of that Latinidad or whatever you choose to call it, because many people are choosing, to not call it Latinidad anymore. And we come, right? We are from different races, from different ethnicities. We come with different languages. I mean, let's acknowledge the hundreds of indigenous languages that make part of who we are as well. So there is no straight line. There is no in that equal. I don't think that is fair to say for the Latina community, for the Latinx community, or the Latine, right? Which is really like Spanish language in Latin America are using the language of inclusivity with the E instead of the X, because it's not in Spanish, it doesn't work. So it is a tough topic in equality. And what I want to invite people to, especially if you identify as Latina, if there is any reason because your abuelita or whatever, okay, and you grew up like that, and that is what you feel identified with, then you should own it. And we should embrace that. And we should allow everybody to express themselves in the best way that they want to express and feel welcomed in every space.
That's very true. And coming here, for me I was raised in Brazil, so of course I'm Latina. But when I got here, the
You were
discussion is
Brazilian. You weren't even Latina. You were Brazilian, right? I was
exactly.
Salvadoreña. Like,
Exactly. And then you got
mhm.
here, and then the discussion is like, well, but where are your parents from? Where are your grandparents from? So, this idea of belonging when we're talking to the BIPOC community is really interesting, because it really is about who identifies with what, where, and, the experiences we have as a child, an adult, and where we choose to live our lives. So, I love this invitation. Thanks for putting this out there. Another question that I have, I think, is for a lot of people too, is, Latina equal pay, Latina representation when it comes to entertainment. I consistently find myself watching TV and thinking, oh, I see an Asian American, I see an African American. Where's the Latinas at? Where are the Latinos? Well, how come we're not, I guess there was no Latinos in the 1800s. There's no Spanish people. I guess, I find myself looking at that consistently. I mean, I was just watching another show about the 80s. And again, you see in like an Indian American person from India, and you see all sorts, but there's no Latinos. I'm like, well, I guess there were no Latinos in the 80s. You know what I mean? But it's so
Yeah.
interesting that we are the largest community with the largest growth, the largest, purchase of power of purchase, and we're still so underrepresented. What do you think that is?
And I'm always observing that as well. And we have to start by saying that, by acknowledging that, right, it doesn't erase all the important work of having the representation that is now much stronger, as you said, from other communities. So it's amazing to see, right, that the Black community has been able to open up so many doors, because that will open doors and opens up doors for us. And I am not, but we as a Latina community are also Black, right? So that is part. So we have to celebrate that, and be super aware of that. And at the same time, we can acknowledge that there is a huge lack still in representation in Latinx everywhere. So the new census came out, by the date that we're recording this, came out yesterday, the results, right? And one of the most impactful things for me was that California is now officially majority Latinx. It's huge. That's
It is
huge.
huge.
How is that going to represent in California being the biggest provider of media, of tech, and et cetera? Like, how is that actually going to translate in representation in all these sectors where we are sorely underrepresented? And when these sectors that actually are the ones that move the cultural zeitgeist and that move the needle for those dreams that the next generations and our children, are seeing, and the role models that they're looking for, how is that going to impact? Right? I don't know, because at the same time, I know that as Latina, we were talking about Latina equal pay. I forget the number right now, but I believe in California, it is like in California. I mean, we are the group that makes the less cents from the dollar that a white man makes, right? We are the last ones in the totem pole, like I like to say. In California, it's even lower. It's like 46 cents to the dollar that a white man makes. So everything, everywhere where you start really paying close attention to like these lists that come out, again, to like these movies, to these places where there's like this representation, this celebration of people, we're not represented at the same proportion to the representation that we have in the population. So we are 18, almost 20% of the population. And California and places like LA, we're 50%. It's not representative. It's not proportionate. And that's what it is. How can we change it? I mean, we continue having these conversations, and I think the conversations matter a lot because it starts raising awareness, especially to the gatekeepers, right? The thing is that there's so many levels of gatekeepers, and I think we have been unlocking many of those, but the higher up gatekeepers were actually are funding the organizations that can actually advance this equality and advance this representation are not doing it yet. Why? Because they don't see a need to do, because we're still showing up.
Right.
So for me, where we have power is in where we choose to put our dollars, is in where we choose to see, like, who do I choose to hire? If I'm going to hire an accountant, I want it to be Latina. If I'm going to hire a lawyer, I want it to be Latina, right? If I'm going to spend my money in gifts, I try as much as I can to spend within the community. And when a Latino film comes up, I don't care if it's Argentinians and I'm not Argentinian, or if it's Dominican and I'm not Dominican. I'm gonna go represent it. I'm gonna show up because I know that at the end of the day, that is where our unity actually matters.
And I had a conversation similar with about the Crazy Rich Asians premiere, because when that happened, I had friends in the industry who were, successful writers and would do entire theater buyouts, and they would put their own money on it and say, "You can't afford a $10 ticket? I got you. Come out." And they didn't care who it was. They were just supporting the community in that sense, at like a wider sense of not me versus you, but us. And I'm with you that when one of us rises, we all rise. I mean, there's a difference between what is in it for me and what is in it for the community, right? And those things don't have to be mutually exclusive. Most of the times they're not. But I think it is a grander question. And I'm glad that there is an organization like We All Grow Latina, for your all this time of experience that you've put into building this community. But I do wonder, and maybe you don't have an answer for that, like, how come we are the largest group in California, but we're still the lowest pay? And when Ana mentions the totem pole, she's talking about like all the women of color. She's talking about African Americans, Asian Americans, Indigenous. We're like on
I
the
believe
bottom.
it goes Asian, white. I mean, throughout the year, right? Because that's how it's represented. It's like, how many more months in a year do you have to work to make what a white non-Hispanic man makes in 1 year? So I believe it's like Asian, it's like a month and a half. Then, and that's where the dates that are represented come in, that are acknowledged. Then it's white women, non-Hispanic, and then Black women, I believe, indigenous Black, and Latinas are last.
And that's huge,
And we're
especially.
talking last, we're talking November. So it's like 11 months, 11 additional months that we have to work. And I think, another conversation, and I've written about this before, that talking about Latina equal pay, is that we acknowledge the average of equal pay day usually falls around March, right? So it's like bringing in the average of everything. But even when you hear in the news that they're talking about equal pay in that average date that is acknowledged nationally, there's a sore lack of the conversation of Latina. And that is where I say we cannot be equal until we're all equal. So you have to start from the bottom. That is where you have to lift up. Because if we're going to try to get from 72 cents to $1, it's much easier to try to get from 51 cents to $1. We have to start there for there to actually be equality. And usually that's not where the conversation focuses on. It does not focus on us. It focuses on us because we have made it so. Because we have been, not we as in We All Grow, we have been part of many organizations and companies that have been shining a light on this. But the most important part for me has been when we started really talking about Latino Pay Day about 3 years ago, really bringing it to light. What we saw that the real impact and the real change that was happening was in the awareness and in the aha moment of our community members actually receiving this information for the first time. So how can you even access that power or try to move towards change when you are kept in the dark, when you don't even know the reality that you can ask your colleague how much she makes so that you can understand if you're being paid equally. So I believe in the one that you spoke on that we did in an event that we did in 2019 in LA. I don't know if you remember the story of this girl that she was sharing with us that she loved her job, that she was in marketing and loved her job, and she really did not want to quit. But she had found out that her colleague, a white woman, made $40,000 more than her. I mean, that's a whole other salary.
Mm-hmm.
And that she had already talked to HR, she had talked to upper management, and she was not getting anywhere. But she didn't want to have to be the one to quit her job because she really enjoyed it. What could she do? Right? And it's these type of just raising that awareness and knowing that there is a problem so that you can see if that problem is affecting you, and then you see what are the resources and the tools. And the more that we as a community and as allyship, we bridge and we bring together those tools for all of us to understand how to negotiate, to understand our rights, to understand how, to get that encouragement and that support system, that net behind you that will push you, that net behind you that can catch you, but also that sisterhood behind you that will push you forward to be like, you go, right? You go and you have the conversations that you need to have, and it's okay, right? If you need to leave that job, girl, there's something better waiting for you, because that's true. There's always something better waiting for us. They're not better. There's always something there waiting for us that is actually meant to be for us. And so having that whole support system, that mental support, that spiritual support, that actual physical support of, hey, maybe I can help you get another job, right? How do we support each other? Because systemically, it's still not in our lifetimes. It won't change. It has to be us one by one supporting each other.
Do you think it's also a part of the Latino, I would say, culture? Because I remember growing up and my mother saying to me, you don't complain, you don't ask, you accept what you get, you be grateful. And when I moved to America and I went back to visit my family, I remember my mother saying, why you like now you're so entitled? Why do you walk around like you deserve everything? And I really thought about that for a while because I
Yeah.
didn't feel entitled. And I understand what the shift was, that now all of a sudden I'm complaining, I'm asking for what I think I deserve. And I'm like, if I go to a restaurant, the food is not what I like it to be or what I asked for, I would say something, which, growing up in a Latin American country, you don't say anything. You just eat it
Yeah.
or you just brush it off. So do you think that that really bleeds into our careers? And maybe
A
that's why
hundred
we,
percent. No, 100%. I mean, one of the phrases that has been used a lot within the community is it, calladita no me veo más bonita. I don't know if in Brazil it was the same, but that our moms would always tell us, calladita te ves más bonita. When you're quiet, you look prettier, right? And that was the standard. You wanted to look pretty. You wanted to look like a little princess, right? And navigate life like that. And that's all, that's good. That's what we're going to aspire for. Um, because that's how you're going to get ahead in life, really.
Mhm.
But the reality is yes, that beautiful part of our culture that does bring in a lot of gratitude is also what holds us back, especially as women. And it's finding that intermediate of, we can never let go of gratitude in our life ever, right? We can never let go of that. But at the same time, we need to understand our value and know when what we are bringing to the table is worth a lot more than what I am receiving, and being able to put those boundaries. But that has been, I feel, in my generation and your generation, um, one of the hardest things to break through, as we are getting more opportunities, as we are getting more, because it starts with education, right? We are getting more opportunities in education, we're getting more opportunities in our career, we're getting more opportunities now with this digital space that has allowed us to build businesses out of nothing. At least my business was built out of nothing, and it was completely self-funded thanks to these opportunities that we now have. But within that, we've also had to navigate feeling not welcomed, right? Feeling that we have to let go of the parts that we love the most to be able to assimilate and be able to fit in to either the corporate environment or even the business environment. I mean, I've had a really hard time. I don't have investment because I never felt 10 years ago, things have changed now, but that I never felt welcome in those conversations and in those rooms where investments were happening. Um, and and navigating all that, and at the same time having these huge dreams and having these huge visions, and having to move them forward with a lot of internal validation, because our families usually don't understand, because they are still functioning from a lot of fear from the sacrifices that they have had to make for us. So there's a lot of layers to all the things that we have to navigate just to be able to fulfill our own dreams, right? So, and add to that, the system, fighting through the system that just doesn't want to see us grow, because I mean, us becoming the the majority of the population of California is scary for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and that comes with political power, financial power, and when we vote, when we're represented, then yes, there's more service to our community. When I first moved to LA, I met this woman in a bathroom at an audition room, and she was an African American woman, and she said to me, "Do you know?" While she was putting her lipstick, looking at me through the mirror, and she said, "Do you know why white men keep working in this business?" And I said, "No," and she goes, "Because they keep hiring each other." The day
Mm-hmm.
that we start hiring each other, they don't have a job anymore. And that's why they're
Mm-hmm.
fighting so hard to keep it. And I never forgot that. And it really
Mm-hmm.
goes to the heart of what you're saying. But now you are a mother of a young Latina woman. So how do we change the narrative? How, from your experience, maybe as a note of hope and advice to our listeners, how do we change the narrative?
Listen, I'm very hopeful, but I'm very hopeful when I see my daughter, because she has been exposed to all these incredible women. She's been going to the summit, We All Grow Summit, for the last 5 years, and she has been exposed to all these conversations. She has been exposed to these women in power, to these women that know their worth, right? To these women that embrace their Latinidad fully, to these women that have created and made their dreams out of nothing. And she has absorbed all that, and the thing that makes me the most hopeful is that she knows that it's all possible.
And that's a beautiful message. At the end of all of this is just to
Mm-hmm.
feel this way. When I get the question like, "Oh, whose career would you like to have? Like, what, Latino artist would you like your career to be like?" And I'm like, the only person that I ever grew up with was J Lo. We had one. We had one, and there's Shakira, and I wasn't a singer.
Mhm.
So, we had two people to look up to, and they had very specific careers, as Jenny from the Block and in the Shakira, like, they culminated together in the Super Bowl, which was like epic for
Yeah.
my child self. But, that was the only person we had to. So now, as we look into this new era of television and so much that's out there, I really hope that we have characters who are lawyers, who have accents. I think there is this perception. I've gotten that a lot. It's like, "Oh, you have a slight accent, that's why you're not going to book work," or your hair is too light, but you're supposed to be Latina, so you have to dye it. These are things that I have been told. I have a friend whose name was Javier, and he was told to change it because he was too Latino, and he became Ethan. So there is these things that you hear, and I really hope that gathering together for this fight for equality, like an equal spot in the light. And I don't mean equal the same for everyone. I
Mhm.
mean equal, like you said, let's be represented as we are in the reality of society. And that's
Yeah.
what's missing.
And as we, as we follow the footsteps of really incredible moves that the Black community has been making the last few years, I mean, and incredible moves based off of a lot of hurt, right? And a lot of loss, and anguish and grief, and the horrible history that this country carries. We have to recognize that as we start, these doors are being opened by others, by us, and as we continue opening these doors, how are we going to continue opening that within the Latino community to groups within the Latino community that are also still very underrepresented? So as we continue stepping forward and going up, and it's always that cycle, right? It's like when one grows, we all grow. I'm going to continue that. It's that vicious, it's that endless loop of who can I bring up, who can I bring up, who can I bring up, and that's really where the change is going to happen. It's really, really up to us, and we're ready.
We really are ready. And I appreciate this talk today. Thank you so much for joining us. And please tell our listeners and our viewers, where can we find you? How can we follow your work?
Well, to follow me personally, it's on Instagram and Twitter. It's Ana ANA Flores, Flores underscore me. And We All Grow Latina is at We All Grow Latina everywhere. And if you really want to be part of the heart of the community digitally and where we really connect in beautiful ways, it is Amigas. We All Grow Amigas is our platform, our membership. It's free. It's amigas.weallgrowlatina.com.
And Amigas is not just for Latinas, it's for anybody who'd like to join.
Anybody who identifies as Latina or who wants to hang out with Latinas.
Yes.
Yes.
I love that. Thank you so much, Ana, for your time. And I hope to talk to you again
Thank you.
soon. Bye.
Probably the most significant year in my artistic career, but just in my life in general. Like, it was such a beautiful thing. It was so great and so needed. And I am so grateful and so honored to like really listen to it.